कुंज बिहारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
जय गोपी जन वल्लभ श्रीवरदारी
जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी
जय गोपी जन वल्लभ श्रीवरदारी
जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी
यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना
यशोदानन्दन भज जनरञ्जन
यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना
यशोदानन्दन भज जनरञ्जन
यमुनातीरावनचारी
तीरावनचारी
यमुनातीरावनचारी
यमुनातीरावनचारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
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 हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
जय राधा कुंज बिहारी राधे
जय राधा कुंज बिहारी राधा देवामयि सुभद्रा
जय श्रीनाथ जी जय बाल गोपाल जय श्रीनाथ जी जय गिरि गोवर्धन
जय श्रीनाथ जी जय बाल गोपाल जय श्रीनाथ जी जय गिरि गोवर्धन
जय गौर निताय जय गौर निताय जय गौर निताय जय गौर निताय
जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय
जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा
जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा
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 जय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल जय गौर हरि बोल
निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
जय हरि नाम संकीर्तना की जय श्री प्रभुपाद की जय अनंतकोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय
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 ओम ज्ञानातिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पदान् सहगणा श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, everyone. So, I need that phone for the conference. So, welcome to our Bhaktiviksha discussion in our continued modified format. As we all are facing certainly at least in this modern era, an unprecedented time battling this COVID-19 virus. So it certainly creates a great opportunity for us to evaluate and understand not only the external platform, the bodily platform, how to protect ourselves from such a virus and how to handle so many different situations and circumstances, but also can lead us to be a little bit more deeply introspective about what it all means to us and how to confront such situations, and what we can glean out of it. In the corporate world, in the business world, there was great disruption in the economy, and companies are scrambling, working to navigate these truly unprecedented times. But each of them is looking for the opportunity beyond this immediate situation and how it can persevere, and not only persevere, but become better and take advantage of this distressful situation and come out, we say, stronger. And that is certainly the goal of these different corporations. And so from our perspective, we can apply a similar consciousness, but for a much, much higher goal, which is how we can use this situation as an opportunity to come out stronger and more determined on the path of perfection. Srila Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter that the highest perfection is having faith, that faith in Krishna consciousness is the highest perfection of life. That is intelligence, specifically Vyavasamika Buddhi. So this having intelligence that Krishna consciousness is the perfect and only means of success, that is the perfection of life. And so we can use this current situation as an opportunity to reflect back and charge our spiritual process. Because in moments like this, one thing is abundantly clear, that this world is a dangerous place. Every step is a source of potential setback. And we see in this situation, nobody is spared, virtually, from the impact of such a situation. So Krishna, as I mentioned last time, that great personalities, they have found great peace and steadiness in the midst of calamity from one source. It is only one place. From the beginning of time, every time there was a great calamity, very intelligent, wise personalities, they seek the shelter of the Supreme Lord. And in this Bhagavad Gita, we see that very clearly with Arjuna. And Arjuna was in a great position of distress. And he was very fearful. He had extreme anxiety. He was stressed. He was confused about what to do. What decision should he take? And it seemed like every option he had was a lose-lose situation. So what did he do? He surrendered to Krishna. And Krishna, in a very short conversation, brought him to the highest consciousness. And the highest consciousness was to just think of him. Manmana bhava mad bhakto. Just become my devotee. Offer your homages to me. Offer your obeisances to me. Right? Namaskuru, offer my obeisances. Everything will be fine. So we see that very perfect instruction. And throughout Bhagavad Gita, we see some very nice verses that guide us here. And I thought before we get into chapter 11, which interestingly, picking up from the verse we just left off last week with verse 33, verse 34, 35, and 36 of chapter 11, speak about Krishna's grand plan. And so the great devotee sees within even these types of situations, what is Krishna's plan for me in this situation? And by seeing that, we can take advantage of this difficulty to come out of the other side of it very strong. Not only strong bodily, certainly we want and pray for the health of everyone, but we want to come out spiritually strong. Because as much as we are concerned about the physical well-being of everybody, which is very important, we're most concerned about the spiritual well-being. So how we can increase our spiritual well-being while we become very focused on our physical well-being through this difficulty. So in the 66th verse of the second chapter, Krishna gives a very precise formula that is startlingly clear. He says, one who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be happiness without peace? So this is certainly a time of maybe unsteady minds. And without a steady mind, there cannot be any peace. And without any peace, there cannot be any happiness. Right? So the current material situation is disturbing the peace of mind. Right? We are having so many restrictions and so many limitations. There's fear of contacting the virus. There is the fear of the unknown. You know, where is it going? How many are getting it? How does it transmit it? So much is there. But at the end of the day, Krishna is saying, one who is not connected with the Supreme Lord, no matter what else you have, you cannot have peace and happiness. But in the prior verse, Krishna makes a very powerful statement. He says, for one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. Now, we see the threefold miseries of life. Adhyatmik, adhibhautik, and adhidevik. Difficulties of the mind and body. Difficulties of living entities. And of natural disasters. We certainly are living with such a situation, right, that is creating such difficulty. But Krishna is saying, one is satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries don't exist. It's a very interesting statement Krishna is making. Does this mean that if you're a devotee, hand in a bead bag, coronavirus doesn't exist for you? Certainly not. That is not the statement. But what it means is that when one comes to Krishna consciousness, one's consciousness transcends, elevates, goes beyond the material bodily platform. And so these disturbances, these things that are happening, no longer become relevant or important. It doesn't mean one becomes, foolish and does not abide by the precautions that are being stated here, and one becomes, attuned to the situation and making sure we're protecting ourselves. But one's consciousness is not absorbed in this situation. One's consciousness is absorbed in Krishna. And by such, one attains great peace and happiness. So we're not going to get peace and happiness by solving this virus. We're not going to get peace and happiness by having more testing available or by having a vaccine and a cure. Sure, that may temporarily alleviate this immediate situation. But then what's next? A recession that is coming, unemployment, and so many other things, and then the next virus, the next situation, the next hurricane, right? So what is really going to allow one to rise above these threefold miseries? Krishna is saying right here in the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, for one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness. And Krishna uses the word satisfied. What it means, when one comes to Krishna, he is the source of everything. And so all of one's needs, wants, desires become fully satisfied. Even the desire to be protected, to become free from this situation and free from anxiety, also becomes satisfied. So Krishna, being the root of the tree, the root of all existence, is the source of our peace and happiness. But as he said in that first verse I read, from one who is not connected to Krishna, no matter what we do with this situation, vaccines and all those, one will not find ultimate peace. Yeah, maybe we'll find it for a few moments. So here we see very importantly that our source of satisfaction and happiness, it must come on a higher platform, and that is our spiritual life. And so it doesn't mean that one ignores the situation on the bodily platform. And the example we give is if it is raining outside, you cannot stop the rain, but you can be aware that it is raining and take an umbrella and walk outside. And by walking outside with an umbrella, you can remove the effect of the rain on you, because you are now separated from the rain by the presence of this umbrella. So similarly, Krishna consciousness is like that. But we're not going to stop the threefold miseries of the world. They're going to happen based on the laws of karma. So, but what one can do, what the presence of the spiritually centered life, one can become, untouched by that effect. And one's consciousness is not disturbed by such calamities. And so bhakti is like that umbrella in the rain. We're not going to stop it from raining. We're not going to stop these situations from coming. But we can stop them from affecting our consciousness. So this steady mind, it comes only in Krishna consciousness. And this is one of the great lessons we can pull from this situation. Because of all the situations, we've experienced, at least certainly in my lifetime, I can think one of the few times where there's such a collective unsteadiness. We all go through different personal situations, but here it is like broad-based, global. Right? And so it is a great reminder for us of where to take shelter. And we can use this as an opportunity to inspire us in the process of devotional service. And for it, if your mind is unsteady and a little bit bewildered, no, it is not unnatural. But understand that there is a formula, a recipe to control the mind. And in the 6th chapter, there are some very beautiful, powerful verses in the beginning of the 6th chapter. And Krishna says, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So, this mind can be very tumultuous, but it's also our greatest friend if we know how to utilize the mind. So by increasing our meditation and absorption in the Supreme Lord and His beautiful names, forms, and pastimes and qualities, one can conquer the mind. Conquer the mind doesn't mean to stop the mind. It means to elevate the mind to something of higher purpose. And when one does, one's mind becomes the friend. And then in the next 3 verses, Krishna very beautifully describes what happens when one has conquered the mind. From verse 7. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached. For he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. How many of us would like to have this type of tranquility today? Whatever happens, happens. Yes, I'll take my precautions, but what happens, happens. This is available for one who has conquered the mind. So we see even happiness and distress, they're all the same. Why is that the case? Because one has a much higher goal, focus. Whatever happens to the body is insignificant in relationship to what is happening between the spirit, soul, and the Supreme Lord. So one's mentality and mind transcends the platform of the body. And thus his happiness and distress, heat and cold, becomes all the same. And this is only achieved when one finds connection with the Supreme Lord. And it does not mean that one becomes stone-like or completely obtuse to the world around. No, one understands the situation that is happening. One adjusts their own activities in accordance, taking the precautions, being mindful of the situation. But one's consciousness does not become disturbed from its relationship with the Supreme Lord. And so, we have this experience. If you are fully absorbed in, some movie or some TV show, hopefully none of you are in that mode, but if you become so absorbed, anything happening around you, it doesn't even register. It's happening, but because your mind is so focused on something and so absorbed, almost your house could be burning down and you wouldn't notice. Right? So this consciousness is like that. When one becomes absorbed in Krishna, one's thoughts become so transcendently sweet that yes, these things will continue to happen, but they don't shake one's consciousness. So this happens ultimately by the process of chanting the holy names of the Lord. How to conquer the mind is by engaging the mind in the chanting of the holy names. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us this most powerful process. And so I wanted to just start today's discussion with that to help us understand and see what is in the midst of us and how Krishna throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we could read verses from every chapter, and there's a specific instruction and learning of how to apply to this direct situation. And that is one of the great lessons I hope we can take from this, is that this Bhagavad Gita is practical in everyday life. And so even in this specific situation, verse after verse, there are wonderful teachings that tell us. And we can hope and pray to Krishna that as sincerely and as attentively and as earnestly as we are working to protect our body from this virus, we can protect our mind and senses and ultimately our spirit soul from the influences of the material world. Imagine if we applied the same level of precautions. Today people are washing their hands with such enthusiasm. They're being very careful not to come in contact, and it's all the right things we should be doing. And they're avoiding so many different circumstances and situations to protect from this virus. If we apply the same level of precautions to protecting our mind and our eyes from seeing so many things, and protect our consciousness from the influence of Maya, how much success we've made in spiritual life. Let's just take the same precautions and apply them to our spiritual life. The same sincerity, and then what will happen? We have literally shut ourselves out of all influences, which is the right thing to do in the current situation we're in. But actually, the right thing to do going forward is to shut our mind from all the material sense objects, because they bring nothing but suffering and misery. Just as much as contact with this virus will bring suffering, misery, contact with the material energy will bring the same. So we can use this experience as we are training the body to be so attentive to influences, to apply that same to protecting the journey of our soul on the path back home to God. So that same intensity, let us carry it forward on the spiritual platform. Okay? So last week we discussed the 33rd verse, in which Krishna said, "Therefore get up, prepare to fight and win glory, conquer your enemies and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They are already put to my death by my arrangement, and you, O Sabyasachi, can be but an instrument in the fight." This is the 11th chapter. Very powerful verse, in which we understand our role. We are very tiny, insignificant sparks of the Supreme Lord. And if anything is evident today, that is evident. How our entire existence has been uprooted. Who could have imagined just 3 or 4 weeks ago that this would unfold? So it shows how much control we really have. We have a tiny, insignificant role. But Krishna here is saying, Arjuna, you are very talented. You are Sabyasachi. You can shoot arrows with both hands. So whatever talent you have, whatever ability you have, you be an instrument in Krishna's plan. So our consciousness should be that, don't think, oh, I can't do this and I can't do this. No. Krishna doesn't look at what you can't do. He looks at whatever ability you have. Use it in the service of Krishna. And that is what pleases him. So we don't have to lament and think, what I can do. Anyways, even if we had such extraordinary talents, we are still very tiny in comparison to the Supreme Lord. Okay? And now we're going to see even Arjuna, the greatest of all warriors, what Krishna did. He says in the 34th verse, Drona, Bhishma, Jayadrata, Karna, and all the great warriors have already been destroyed by me. Therefore kill them and do not be disturbed. Simply fight and you will vanquish your enemies in battle. Prabhupada says in the purport, every plan is made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is so kind and merciful to his devotees that he wants to give credit to his devotees who carry out his plan according to his desire. Life should therefore move in such a way that everyone acts in Krishna consciousness and understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of a spiritual master. The plans of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are understood by his mercy, and the plans of the devotees are as good as his plans. One should follow such plans and be victorious in the struggle for existence. So whose plan are we all working under? It is Krishna's. It is Krishna's. And we certainly at least have some semblance of understanding that right now, because we're facing a very difficult situation. But this is always within Krishna's plan. And Krishna's plan is always perfect. And what is our job? Krishna had already arranged for all of these warriors to be killed. When Arjuna was watching and seeing the universal form, he was watching these warriors being smashed to pieces, and he became very fearful. He already saw their death. And Krishna is still wants Arjuna to fight. Why? They've already been put to death. Because Krishna wants Arjuna to get the credit. He wants Arjuna to be an instrument in this plan. And so ultimately the reason Arjuna should fight this battle is because Krishna wants him to. But Krishna's plan is perfect. And how to know his plan? How to understand what is Krishna's plan? Why is this all happening? One must obtain the mercy of Krishna and the mercy of Guru. Because the Guru is working under the plan of Krishna. And the Guru advises the disciple and how to act, how to adjust in accordance to all the different circumstances. Right? So Krishna's plan, sometimes we become bewildered. Why is this happening? What's that plan? We can approach the bona fide spiritual master and they can explain to us the plan. But we should have one fact for sure, cemented on it. Krishna's plan is perfect. It has the perfect result. And the devotee sees that whatever Krishna does, it is always for my benefit. It is always for my benefit. That is the vision of a devotee. When there is a calamity, it is for my benefit. When something good happens, it is also for my benefit. Because the devotee does not look, when we see calamity and benefit, we often think only on the bodily platform. But the devotee is thinking, calamity or benefit on the bodily platform, both are beneficial for me for my spiritual progress. And that is why, for the devotee, whatever they encounter, it is always for their best. Maybe not for their body, but certainly for their spiritual life. So Krishna continues in the 35th verse. Sanjaya said, O Dhritarashtra, Sanjaya is speaking now. O king, after hearing these words from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the trembling Arjuna offered obeisances with folded hands. Again and again, he fearfully spoke to the Lord in a faltering voice as follows. So Arjuna was shaking, and we can imagine he's offering obeisances over and over again and trembling. And then Arjuna says, O master of the senses, the world becomes joyful upon hearing your name, and thus everyone becomes attached to you. Although the perfected beings offer you their respectful homage, the demons are afraid, and they flee here and there. All this is rightly done. I just wanted to read the purport. Arjuna, after hearing from Krishna about the outcome of the battle of Kurukshetra, became enlightened as a great devotee and friend of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He said that everything done by Krishna is quite fit. Notice that? Everything done by Krishna is quite fit. Arjuna confirmed that Krishna is the maintainer and the object of worship for the devotees and the destroyer of the undesirables. His actions are equally good for all. Arjuna understood them, that when the battle of Kurukshetra was being concluded, in outer space there were many demigods, siddhas, and other intelligentsia of the higher planets, and they were observing the fight because Krishna was present there. When Arjuna saw the universal form of the Lord, the demigods took pleasure in it. But others, who were demons and atheists, could not stand it when the Lord was praised. Out of their natural fear of the devastating form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they fled. Krishna's statement of the devotees and the atheists is praised by Arjuna. In all cases, a devotee glorifies the Lord because he knows whatever he does is good for all. Wow, if we just read this purport a few more times, how confident Prabhupada says, in all cases, a devotee glorifies the Lord because he knows that whatever he does is good for all. This is the prescribed verse we are supposed to read in the continuation of our series, and how Krishna has arranged for this to come in the midst of this calamity that we are facing. Prabhupada says again in the purport that Arjuna confirmed that Krishna is the maintainer and the object of worship for the devotees and the destroyer of the undesirables. His actions are equally good for all. So in this battle, we know there was such conflict around all the violence that was going to ensue and whether it was right or wrong and how much blood would be spilled. But it was Krishna's plan, so it was perfect. So we can also see this current situation and say it is Krishna's plan. And the devotee sees it is Krishna's plan to remind us of what our real existence is. Our real existence does not exist in eating nicely, sleeping nicely, mating nicely, and defending nicely. All four activities have been cut out by this situation. Restaurants and bars are closed. Gambling institutions are closed. Our sleep is ruined by the tumultuous fear of what's going on. Everything has been upended. The devotee knows this is not the purpose of life. So Krishna's plan is to help us renounce all of those activities, keep us in our house, and dive into the nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam and just read hour after hour. He's even limited our workload for some period of time. Of course, some pain may become associated with that as well. But we can understand how the devotee sees such activities. Again, not blind by them, understanding, yes, I must be cautious, I must do these things. One may argue, oh, Krishna is going to protect me, I can do whatever we want. The devotee does not think that way. The devotee does not want to give Krishna trouble to have to protect us. The devotee becomes very responsible and very wise and cautious to the activities, but never fearful. Mind fully transcended on a higher platform, and knowing Krishna's plan is perfect, as Prabhupada says, in all cases a devotee glorifies the Lord because he knows that whatever he does is good for all. So what more do we have to know beyond? This is Krishna's plan. It is perfect. Take shelter of him, as we read in the second chapter, without being connected to the Supreme Lord. No matter what we have, there will be fear and anxiety and distress. But by the presence of Krishna in our life, we can find great peace and happiness. Amidst the greatest of all calamities, the threefold miseries do not affect the devotee. Yes, they are going on, like the rain may be going on, but if we walk outside with the umbrella of devotional service, we can protect our consciousness. And as I mentioned, let us approach as sincerely we are protecting our body today. Let us protect our spirit soul and its journey back home for the rest of our life. And if we do, our journey back home, back to Godhead, with eternal loving service of the Supreme Lord is assured. Just apply the same level of sincerity that we have today to protecting the body, to the soul. And then we can make great success from this calamity, a great lesson we can extract from it and attain perfection of life. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? So it looks like we have some questions online.
Can't expand it. Oh, here we go. One Mataji mentioned, I'm having a hard time understanding everything happens for a reason, and Krishna has a plan for everything happening around. What I see is suffering, and as a healthcare worker, seeing people suffer is very difficult for me. Which chapter of Bhagavad Gita would help me to understand this better?
Yes. So it's a very natural emotion, and it's a very nice emotion because it's a mood of compassion. And we understand this mood of compassion. But in the second chapter, right in the beginning, if we read the first 30 verses of the second chapter, we see from the first verse, Prabhupada is commenting on the, our compassion, ultimately should be for the soul. And he gives the example of, to save the drowning clothes of a man in the water is not so intelligent. If somebody has fallen off a boat into the water, what do you want to save, the person or the person's clothes? Of course, the person. Right? So similarly, our compassion as a healthcare worker, as an engineer, as whatever profession we may be, we want to ultimately find compassion for the soul. So while we are tending to the needs of the body, let us not forget to offer some compassion to the platform of the soul. Right? And Krishna says that these ups and downs, he says in the second chapter, the happinesses and distresses one should tolerate, like the changing of the seasons. These are all within those first 30 verses of chapter 2. And why is he saying that? Because these happinesses and distresses, they come based on one's karma. What we see happening around us ultimately is a function of one's karma. So this situation arises. So what to do? Do we just say, oh well, tough luck, that's your karma? No. A devotee sees and feels great pain. Para dukkha dukhi. The devotee's only pain is not their own suffering, but seeing the suffering of others. And so a devotee becomes inspired how we can help the suffering of others. Well, finding a vaccine for this virus will temporarily cure the suffering of the body. But is it going to cure disease? So the devotee thinks how I can uplift their consciousness by giving some knowledge, some intelligence, so that one can stop this sinful life and take to a more pious life, and thus end one's real suffering. Right? So that's the understanding. It is natural to find it difficult to see Krishna's plan, but just pray to him. You read these first verses of chapter 2, and it will become clear how to understand it. And in time, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and by the Supreme Lord, it will become clear. And Prabhupada said in this purport to the 34th verse that the plans of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are understood by His mercy. Right? And the plans of His devotees are as good as His plans, meaning the spiritual masters. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Wish everybody a very Krishna conscious week ahead. Please be safe. Please adhere to all of the warnings and precautions that are being enjoined to all of us. And please be happy and peaceful in the midst of this difficulty by taking shelter of the holy names of Srila Prabhupada. Oh, there is
one question just came up.
Yeah.
Actually, two questions just popped up. Maybe there's a delay, sorry. One question is this current situation is Krishna's plan or how we understand?
Well, the current situation ultimately it is Krishna's plan in overseeing and jurisdiction the laws of karma. Ultimately, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That is the laws of karma. Krishna says that very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita. And so the specific how the karma reactions are given out, that is according to the design of the Supreme Lord and executed by material nature. So yes, we can ultimately understand it is Krishna's plan, but who is ultimately responsible, why it's happening, it is because of all of our individual past activities. And so how to stop this in the future is by beginning to take to the process of devotional service. Because Krishna says, aham tvam sarva papebhyo. He says, if you take to my service, I will deliver you from all your sinful reactions. So how to become free from whatever we've done in the past? It is by the process of devotional service. Right? So the root cause of this situation is the collective disobedience to the laws of the Lord. Now, how to get out of this situation going forward is by engaging in the process of devotional service. Okay?
I think that might have answered the second question, but I'll read it in case you wanted to add more. Hare Krishna Prabhuji, how to distinguish between it is reaction of our karma and Krishna's plan?
Yeah.
So I think that.
So Krishna's plan again is not for us to suffer. Krishna wants ultimately all of us to be enjoying with him eternally, with no birth, no death, no old age, no disease. But he gives us free will to choose. And so as Arjuna was saying in this purport, or Prabhupada was saying in the purport, the devotees were relishing and the demons were fleeing, both by this single manifestation. So Krishna ultimately desires all of us to be in eternal loving service with him. But he gives us the free will to choose. So when we choose to do the various activities, then there are reactions. Right? Just like the child has free will to decide whether they're going to study for the exam or not. If they study, the good results will come. If they don't, bad results will come. But if bad results come, it doesn't mean the teacher is bad. It's simply based on what the student did. Right? So, similarly, Krishna gives out good and bad, not based on who he likes and who he doesn't like, or the mood of the time. No. Based on the reactions. Based on the actions, excuse me. So, then that way, this is how we understand Krishna's plan. How those reactions come, yeah, Krishna designs it. Exactly how the reactions are going to come, that is by his design. But ultimately, because of our activities, we create these situations. And the good news is, we can also undo them. As vast and as, predominant as this situation is, it also can be overcome like that, with the powerful chanting of the holy names. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai. Hare Krishna. See you next week.